Hi, I'm Emma Rin, and today we're going to talk about the economic transformation of rural counties near national parks. First, we're going to go over some basic National Park Service facts. The National Park Service covers the administered lands, waters, and historic sites, as well as National Park Service programs. These also have economic benefits that surround communities and gain economic benefits from their proximity to the National Park Service. The National Park Service supports more than 295,000 jobs. In the fiscal year of 2015, the National Parks Service budget was $2.8 billion. However, the National Park Service contributes about $32 billion to the economy annually. The National Park Service covers 84 million acres and has over 417 sites. An article by Linda Blimes found that parks provide around $92 billion into the economy annually, but are only given about $3 billion from the federal government. The Old West community attempts to lower federal National Park Service funds and divide public lands into private land to be used for resource mining and extraction rather than natural amenities. Nearby properties gain value based on proximity to wilderness and wilderness-based enhancement. Much of the value of the national parks is given from passive values, rather just existing, and not the visitation charges. We should define Old West versus New West. The Old West is based mainly off of extractive jobs that see nature as a resource, and the Old West is normally older and more conservative people, and their industry is primary and export. The Old West strives to divide public lands, or federal lands, into private lands for private use and mining. In contrast, the New West is natural amenity-based jobs, often young and liberal, the creative class workers, and the New West is often service and tertiary industry jobs. The New West values conservation and restoration of public and private lands. Let's look at a local Old West economy. First, it begins with extraction of the natural environment. Then it exports the materials. From that, there is income into the local economy. Then it multiplies as more people are put to work. The community is made possible from this extraction. This is not a very diverse economy because it is based off of a singular export. In contrast, the New West economy circulates around the environmental quality of an area. The beauty and natural amenities of the environment attract people to come visit specific locations. This input of tourism and recreation generates economic activity in these communities. As the economic activity grows, the need for a more diverse economy that can support a higher population, such as healthcare, retail, and information jobs, grow. This results in an economy dependent both on the environmental quality of the public land, national park services, which fuels conservation values, and the leadership and communication within the community itself. These communities that surround the National Park Service are called gateway communities. This is because often these communities are what people and visitors pass through when going to the National Park Service. These communities often have hotels and grocery stores and so forth to support the tourists who will go into the National Park Service, as many of these amenities cannot be found within the national parks itself. 7 key capital assets are identified in gateway communities: the natural asset, the incentive for conservation, support for conservation, education and capacity for natural resource management. There is the physical or built asset, new buildings being built or buildings being restored, which leads to new economic additions. There is the financial or economic asset, such as tourism contracts, land leases, wildlife quotas, and the overall economic self-reliance of an economy as it grows and diversifies. Additionally, for gateway communities, there is the political asset, the increased level of management, leadership of a community, and a strengthened relationship with a government as the community works together with the National Parks Service. There is also the institutional asset, such as local self-esteem being enhanced and increased training and education as the community diversifies and grows in the economy. There is a social and cultural asset, such as the recognition of local political community and the local history. And finally, there is the human capital. There is increased employment and overall sales. Here again is the formal definition, according to Headwater Economics, of a gateway community. These communities are border areas of public lands and often the National Park Service wilderness. They obviously benefit from and have a natural amenity-based economy. Headwater Economics found that protected federal public lands in the West, including lands in non-metro counties, can be an important economic asset that extends beyond tourism and recreation to attract people and businesses. Additionally, non-labor income, often retirement or investment, is the largest rising field of personal income for rural counties in the West. This investment shows that people not only believe in what is going on in the West, but also want more National Park Service. Shifts from historically resource mining-based jobs to service jobs are taking place in the western U.S. counties. Recreation and tourism of public lands has led to an amenity migration that has drawn young, innovative workforce westward. This includes the creative class, and the amenity migration is an overall movement of jobs into the westward counties of the United States. Many young workers in the New West have said that they would rather live in a rural county that has higher areas of wilderness rather than living in an urban county, even if the urban county had potentially higher wages than the rural county. This shows that the values of the New West are more than just money. They care also about the amenities. Headwater Economics found that population, employment, personal income, and per capita income were significantly higher for the first three in areas with higher amounts of wilderness compared to lower amounts of wilderness or federal land in a survey of non-metro western counties. All of this leads to my research question. Does the presence of the National Park Service benefit nearby communities in the rural West? My study area is the western states and their counties, and I will be doing near versus far of the National Park Service. So near will be considered 20 miles, and far will be considered farther than 20 miles from the National Park Service. The attributes I will be looking at are the percent of college graduate, the average per capita income, average household income, home value, and overall unemployment rate. First, I need to identify rural counties. On the left, you can see I separated rural versus urban counties, rural being green. And then on the right, only the rural western counties are shown. Then I will identify near versus far of the National Park Service. Again, near is within 20 miles. So, even if a county does not necessarily have the National Park Service within its boundaries, if it is within 20 miles of a National Park Service, it will be considered near a national park. First, we will look at the college graduate percent when we compare. Near national parks has an average of 21.9%, while far from national parks has an average of 20.7%. While this may seem like a very small difference, Harry Anthony Petrinos, the manager at the World Bank's Education Center, says that the human capital theory suggests that investing in education has a payoff in terms of higher wages. This means that despite this slight difference, an economy can be very different depending on how many college graduates there are in a county. The overall growth of an economy can be based off of a college graduate percent. Next, we will look at median home value. Near national parks has an average of $183,726, while far from national parks has an average of $175,995. As you can see, near national parks wins out by almost $10,000. This shows that the amenities and natural-based enhancement are true for median home value comparison. Looking at the median household income, there was only a very slight difference in income, but near national parks still wins out. But when looking at median per capita income, far from national parks wins, with an average of $24,412, while near national parks only has an average of $23,636. Overall, based on the literature review and my data findings, it can be concluded that the rural counties with higher levels of wilderness and are in proximity of the National Park Service lands do have generally higher economic statistics compared to the rural counties that fall beyond the 20 miles of the National Park Service. Median per capita income was the economic factor that did not match up with some previous literature findings, as counties farther away from the National Park Service had a slightly higher average. This can be explained by when I said earlier that a lot of young people are moving out to the rural western counties and are accepting slightly lower wages in the trade of having the benefits of the natural amenities nearby, rather than living in urban counties that could pay higher. These graphs that I made show once again the higher outcomes of the rural western counties. But obviously, if the National Park Service did not exist, none of these economic benefits would have been possible in the first place. As some people have argued, the National Park Service might not need as much funding as the Old West prescribes, but the New West would love to have more funding for the National Park Service. This would not only be a benefit for the National Park Service itself, but also the economies around it. If more money were to be given to the National Park Service, much higher biodiversity could be protected and more efforts could be put into conservation. The U.S. wilderness managers were given a survey to assess their concerns or support they had for future decision-making if more money was to be allocated to the National Park Service. Most of these respondents, 78%, were from the western United States or Alaska. This is because that is where the majority of the National Park Service is. The responsibilities of the managers include resource management, planning, public information and education, policy, visitor management, and law enforcement. The top answers from the managers, if given more money for the National Park Service, was funding for the lack of political and financial support for wilderness protection, the management of invasive species, public awareness of climate change and ecological restoration, wildland fire suppression and management, motorized and mechanical equipment, trespassing and illegal use, and the fragmentation and isolation of wilderness as ecological islands. All of these support the natural lands that the National Park Service so dearly tries to protect. Education of the community would not only help the National Park Service extend their benefits and resources, but also try and change the opinions of those who think the National Park Service may not deserve or need the funding that they so desperately would like. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and I hope you go support the National Park Service. These are my sources for my literature review. They're my data sources for my GIS maps.